Hello, everybody. This is Steve Duffy from revisithhealthcare.com. And today my guest is Dr. Nate Petley of Waterville, Maine. Say hello to everybody, Dr. Nate.
Hello, everyone. Dr. Nate Petley, naturopathic doctor in Waterville. Yes.
Yes, and Dr. Nate is very prolific with workshops and events going on in the area. He's actually a herbalist and an herbal instructor, so he is teaching people how to heal themselves and others with herbs. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about different ways of using herbs in your own life for self-care, and specifically we're going to go into digestive health because that seems to affect so many people, and it is the core of so many different illnesses and symptoms that we're coming down with. And maybe instead of treating all of those symptoms independently, like they're separate problems, maybe we can get to the core of it, heal the gut, and begin to heal our whole body at the same time. How's that sound?
That sounds great. Do we have 3 days to do this? It'll take a while. A lot of information.
Absolutely. And this is a big topic, and we're going to probably cover a lot of stuff within the next 20, 30 minutes or so. And again, we want to apologize for being late. That's actually my fault, just having technical difficulties. So thanks for bearing with us. Hopefully everything goes smooth from here on out. If you have any questions, please type them right into the box. We'll see them come up, and Dr. Nate will talk about that and answer your questions. So anyway, when we're talking about digestive health, this has really come on my radar because I know a lot of people recently that are getting their gallbladders removed, and I know other folks who have liver problems, and with a little bit of research, I found out that as Americans, we're spending about $5 billion just on gallbladders, gallbladder surgery or gallbladder disease. $5 billion, and we're all, as a society, trying to find ways to pay for things, but we know that prevention is the answer here. And Dr. Nate, let's go ahead and kind of start by defining some of the problems. What are, when people are dealing with gallbladder disease, does that automatically mean that we have to have it removed, or are there things we can do to kind of repair, and there's more than the gallbladder?
Right. So that's a loaded question, because if there is a gallbladder attack and there's a stone going into the duct and blocking the duct, that it's an emergency situation. So I don't want to touch onto the emergency situation. I'd rather talk more about the prevention. How did somebody get to that state?
Okay.
If somebody's in my office, yes, I will work with that. But in an interview situation, it gets really tricky, and I'd hate somebody to try some of these subtle prevention techniques when they really did need an emergency surgery. So does that just differentiate where we're going to go with this?
Right, because there are several different issues, especially when it comes to the gallbladder. You do have gallbladder disease, right? And then you have, just some other challenges.
So let's back up and say, what happens? So when we talk about gallbladder, we have to talk about the whole picture. So digestion at large starts in the mouth. We start chewing food. We have teeth for a purpose. We have saliva for a purpose. And it trickles down from one end to the other. And when we see an imbalance lower down, say that the liver, the gallbladder, the large intestine, small intestine, the appendix, you name it, we have to look at, that system, that organ, that structure. But in prevention, we want to look upstream. We want to see if we have lower digestive health issues, what's going on in the stomach? Is the stomach acid doing what it's doing? Is the pancreas releasing enzymes that we need? Is the liver gallbladder working together to break down other fats? So it's looking at the large picture when we even isolate and zoom in on one structure, say the gallbladder. So does that make sense? We zoom in, and that's often what doctors are doing. We zoom in where it hurts. We zoom in where there's a complication. I like to zoom, while I do that, at the same time, I zoom back out and say, what's really going on elsewhere that influenced this? And if we can treat that, sometimes that can prevent major complications where we had zoomed in and didn't really get anywhere. Are you following?
And, you know, personally, I don't like to get into too much of the science. However, I do realize with my own behavior, if I understand how, you know, the anatomy works or the functioning of something, when I understand it a little bit, it actually affects my behavior, because
absolutely, knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power, especially when you use it. So
when I look at this, in an interview, I don't like giving specifics so much because it's such an individual basis. I could have 10 people with digestive complaints. Let's say heartburn, something that people do experience and it's not so risky. Let's say heartburn, I'm going to give that each person something different as a treatment plan. Why do they have heartburn? So a lot of these, instead of looking at heartburn as a disease, I look at it as a symptom of something else going wrong. Sometimes it's in the stomach, sometimes it's not. Sometimes gas and bloating is because of the intestinal system, sometimes it's because of the stomach, sometimes it's because of the liver. So we have to look upstream, look at the larger picture. So specifics in this case are very tricky. However, because I do love herbs, I do love prevention, and I love teaching about that, there are really simple at-home treatments that we can try for the subtle, the non-emergency care situations, like gas and bloating or minor heartburn.
Okay, and before we go into specific, you know, herbs that will help to heal something, can we spend just a few minutes on what are the real problem foods, or what are we doing that's really causing us to be sick? I think a lot of people know the basics, but, you know, especially if you're having gut problems, there probably are certain things you need to avoid completely, right?
Yes. So for the most part, we want to avoid the standard American diet. Fast food, processed foods. There are not enough nutrients to sustain us for health and vitality. And that's what prevention is all about. I see patients who are otherwise relatively healthy, and they say, I want to set myself up for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. All right, what do we do? I'm changing the diet to say, let's get rid of refined sugars, refined flours, and go with whole foods. I try to simplify it. So as I remove things like those major foods, I'm trying to add other foods in to take its place. I don't like to leave a hole in the plate.
Well, that makes sense, and it does seem that when you do add those things in, sometimes it can push the other stuff out. You know, just
it replaces it, and that's I think a better approach. Instead of saying you can't have this ever again, well, I don't think it's black and white. You don't need it probably 3 times a day. Maybe this item, this whatever treat that you like, is a once a month treat. Maybe that's going to work, but we're going to base it on what are your signs and symptoms, what are we treating, and if we're actually actively treating a condition where we have gas and bloating or heartburn, if that's a trigger, you have to decide, are you okay with that result from eating that food? So people often know their triggers. I get heartburn when I eat pizza is a common comment that I hear. Well, maybe you shouldn't be eating pizza as opposed to reaching for a remedy to treat that. Or why are you getting heartburn when eating pizza? What if it was the best pizza ever? Is it inherently bad? Maybe not. Why are you getting heartburn? Your digestion isn't working well enough. So we do things to investigate why is this happening? And that's what a naturopath does best. We investigate. An herbalist does that as well.
Yeah, excellent. And I think it's important that we touch on this, just because, you know, a lot of people, for instance, if you have a little bit of heartburn or bloating or something like that, you can run down to the drugstore and pick something up that's going to cover that, you know, make that symptom go away or make you feel better right away. But does it actually make you better?
No, what you're doing is treating a symptom. And I love the analogy of using a smoke alarm that goes off. So a smoke alarm goes off. That's telling you something's going wrong in the body. Our symptoms that we have in the body, gas and bloating, acid reflux, are symptoms. It's saying, look over here, look at me. So what these over-the-counter remedies often do is suppress that symptom. So basically, it's taking the smoke, the battery out of the smoke detector. Wow, that noise really got to me. It's not there anymore. Yeah, but something's burning still. It didn't get rid of the ultimate cause. So what I do is I look for the ultimate cause of where is this coming from? And that's one thing that I ask every patient, whether it's to them or to me, to myself. What's going on here? What is the common thread? Where did this really come from? Because it's often not what we think it is.
Right. And if there's one place I think where medicine can evolve, it is getting more to the cause and discovering the cause of the problem rather than treating the symptoms.
Exactly. And that's an age-old philosophy, find the root of disease. And it's different for every person. So it's an active investigation. It's not always easy. And sometimes we even where we think we have the answer, it only uncovers something else that was suppressed. So we try to unravel this. We peel back layers of this onion so that we get to the root cause. And every time we remove a layer, the person increases their vitality. They feel better. That's their ultimate goal. And that's really what we have to go by. How are they feeling?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I just want to kind of involve some of the folks who have joined us here today. We want to thank you for coming. We do have a lot more to cover. Do any of you actually have experience using herbs to heal? I think many people are cooking with herbs, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, I think, Dr. Nate. But have any of you used herbs to heal a symptom, or do you use herbs on a daily basis to kind of to make sure you stay healthy?
I love questions, as my students know, so feel free.
Yeah, right. And if you have any questions, please pop in. My questions only go so far too, but all right. So
when it comes to home care and home health care and herbalism, we start with what we have. And the best place to start for me is in the kitchen, because I already have a pantry full of herbs. It's called my spice cabinet. And I'm cooking with these on a daily basis. Why? Because they taste good and I enjoy them. But when I have a digestive complaint, and it's common, it doesn't mean you have a disease. It just means, all right, maybe I ate too much. Maybe that Thanksgiving dinner was a little too big for my stomach and my body's not happy. What do? I don't reach for something that suppresses digestion. I reach for something that encourages the function of all of the system so that it works together and digests food better, passes it quicker, and eases all of the complaints of, say, gas and bloating or a little bit of heartburn or whatever we're talking about. So then we look at, well, which herbs do we use from the cupboard? And there's so many we could spend a day on all of them. But in a nutshell, things like, I love using carminatives, things that help us expel gas.
What do you call them?
Carminatives.
Carminatives.
And they really help with that spastic digestive system where you have some cramping, some bloating, the lower belly, where it's like, it just feels really uncomfortable. And I love my favorite combination, fennel, coriander, and cumin. Great combination, and you can either chew on some of these seeds or make a tea out of them. They're warming. They really help encourage a bowel movement down, just because they're antispasmodic to the digestive system.
Oh, okay.
If I need to, add some ginger to that, also a great digestive aid. And teas are simple, but you can chew on a little bit of these seeds. So simple to do. And I'll do that until I get relief. So I'll chew on a few seeds. Sometimes it just takes a few more seeds, which is a very simple, free remedy. And instead of suppressing the symptoms or suppressing the digestive tract, it's allowing it to function. And that's being corrective, which means we're not suppressing that symptom, we're getting rid of the cause of it, getting rid of the food that might be causing it. So other things I might look at.
We do have a question.
All right.
Jeff, thanks for your question, actually. Jeff is asking about cannabis or CBD. Your thoughts on that, Dr. Nate?
In digestive health, I haven't used it, or I haven't seen where it's been beneficial to say the gas and bloating and the common complaints of digestive health. We look at it for deeper seated issues, but not for that's not my go-to in general.
So what kind of issues would those, or the CBD or the
so we're looking chronic inflammation, especially in the joints and the muscles, that sort of thing. Cancer, great research coming out on the benefits. So great promise, and I think it's an up and coming herb to be using. I haven't when I reach for things that are in my cupboard, and that's what the seeds are what I generally have. I haven't had to go stronger because they've always worked, and I would use, to me that would be a little bit stronger.
Yeah. Okay. And the biggest thing that I think with the legalizing of the cannabis and the CBD, medically speaking, and recreational, whatever, but especially for medical marijuana, I think it's very promising for the natural health movement, because this is a plant that's been demonized for decades, and the fact that states and people are stepping up for a plant medicine is very good. A very good sign for our healthcare system taking a shift. Anyway, we'll just leave it at that.
All right.
So yeah, okay, Dr. Nate, you were talking about the things in your cupboard, what you're cooking with, using on a daily basis. Now, is there a difference? I guess there must be a difference between spices and herbs. Is it just where they're grown, or?
In herbalism, we call them all herbs.
Okay.
So technically, we might call a spice something more exotic, a seed for, I use the term herbs interchangeably. It's so much easier. Herbs and spices we consider black pepper a spice, but it's an herb at the same time. So I use herbs as a catchphrase for all of it.
Okay.
But no, they're incorporated into our culinary use, not only because they taste good, but we have found them to be useful in other ways. So we add many of these spices to, say, prevent growth of bacteria in meat. We call it, if we add these spices, we might call that sausage. We might cure things with some of these. It extends the shelf life, and it was done in a time where refrigeration wasn't easily available, unless you had a cold creek running nearby or a cold cave. So these spices were found to inhibit growth. They can also inhibit growth of some of the bad bacteria that we have in our gut. So they're antimicrobial. I actually use these for cold and flu remedies. Some of my favorites: rosemary, oregano, thyme, sage, very antimicrobial. And it covers viruses, bacteria, whatnot. So a tea of that as a first go-to for sore throat, excellent remedy.
Which one?
And the oregano, sage, thyme,
Oh, okay.
they're full of natural essential oils that are antiviral, antibacterial.
Okay. And since it is kind of cold and flu season, can you just go into how would you use those herbs? You just cook with them, or you making tea?
So one of the best ways for prevention is to cook more with them in the winter. Absolutely. Get this in on a daily basis. And then if you do feel a tickle in your throat, feel free to make a tea. And those herbs, a simple tea of a teaspoon per cup, and sip on that cup can be plenty. As an herbalist, I'm going to take that and say, all right, what more can I do? How do I make this even bigger and better? I might be adding perhaps some elderberry as a great antiviral immune modulator. Maybe I'll reach for some echinacea. Ginger is another great one for the cold and flu, especially if they're cold. If you're feeling cold and you've got a chill from being outdoors, some ginger tea when you come back in. Great remedy to prevent and also to treat.
And I picked up something from you. I actually started using this year. When you spoke at the Common Ground Fair, you mentioned using pine needles for vitamin C.
Absolutely.
It's very hard to find a natural source of vitamin C in Maine or what.
In winter in Maine, yes, I agree. But every time I go, and I try to do this daily, go for a winter walk. It's really good to, even on those cold days, and I'm not out for very long, a 2-second run to the tree and back, and I've picked some pine needles. And that keeps me in touch with nature. And I think that really helps prevent that seasonal affective disorder. Every time it warms up 2 degrees, I feel it. I can tell. And I really appreciate even the warm day that we're having today. It's beautiful out. If we stay in the steady, 80-degree weather inside, well, we get chilled very easily when we go out when it's 40. But if you get your body to acclimate to your surroundings, you get a little hardier. I think it's very healthy.
Exactly.
Pick the pine needles. A lot of the evergreens, I'll make a tea out of that, and I'll just sip on that. Especially if there's a sore throat. Especially if I'm feeling where there are days where it seems like everybody's sick coming in. They're coughing on me. It's just part of the job. I prevent getting sick by doing all of these remedies. So sometimes I'm doing it in my office. I'm drinking a cold and flu tea right now, just as prevention. Some rose hips, some chamomile, anti-inflammatories, a little bit of echinacea in there. I forget what else I put. I often just throw things in how I feel. I think there's some ginger in there. And in part, I was using it for the throat, so I would be able to have a voice for the half hour that we're doing this and not get too hoarse. So these are anti-inflammatory to the throat. So the best thing about herbalism is that we have herbs that we call them specific for a condition. And we've been talking about herbs that are specific for digestion, specific for the immune system, but they have it's a multifactorial benefit. So that chamomile that I'm using as a cold and flu because it's anti-inflammatory, it's also anti-inflammatory to my throat. So it's a good sore throat remedy. It's a good prevention. It's a good treatment for, well, everything. And that's what I like about these is we can get to many conditions, many systems with one herb or just 2 herbs. So my tea that I called a cold and flu tea, I could have called it pretty much anything else because echinacea is not only a cold and flu remedy, it's a good lymphatic cleanser. So I could have said, this is my lymphatic cleanse tea. Doesn't matter what I call it, the act is still going throughout the body to make sure that I'm improving health and vitality.
Exactly. And I think it's just a great example of how, the issues that we have, we are given the solutions for them. Mother Nature does have the answers, and I'm just so grateful there are people who are still pursuing that knowledge, and expanding on it.
Need that knowledge because, if we look at Western medicine, we are seeing, look at the bacterial, the drug, sorry, I can't talk anymore. Tea's not working for my brain, apparently. Bacteria that are resistant to our antibiotics. we're seeing this more and more, and it's getting rather scary at where this could be headed. However, so the way I describe it is, we have antibiotics that have, very simple yet can be very effective ways to knock down an infection, to kill the bacteria. Herbs have more than one way. So instead of trying to get into a house through the front door, herbs are going to go through the chimney. They're going to go through the windows. They're going to find a crack somewhere. They're going to break through the wall somehow. And herbs are not going to do just one. They're going to do all of these. The benefit of using herbs is that there's more than one approach to how it's working. And that makes them generally more effective.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean, that I'm not reaching for antibiotics when appropriate, but to prevent, to treat minor bacterial infections, I'm going to reach for those herbs first if I can, and use things. I use the analogy that why use a cannon when a Nerf gun will do just fine. And so I use the simplest means that I have. Sometimes those herbs, sometimes it's just a simple diet change. Sometimes it's changing the terrain that the bacteria might be living. So if it's a skin infection, we can throw antibacterial agents on it. But what if we can speed the healing of the tissue faster so there's no place for the bacteria to survive? So we look at what I call, what the triangle of pathology. We have the host, we have the environment, and we have the organism. If we change one portion of that, we can make great impacts. We, in medicine, often think of just the antibacterial agent or the antimicrobial agent. Well, yeah. What about the human? What about changing the environment that organism is living? And if we use that multifactorial approach, we get a little bit more headway. So I know that's a little off topic, but
well,
so it's right?
It is, it's a very in-depth topic. Like I said, I'm just so glad that we do have professionals in our communities that are expanding on this knowledge, practicing it, proving it, so that it's not lost, because it is open source. And if you can't patent something, well, it doesn't fit into our mainstream conventional system. So anyway, right. We have another question here from Elaine. Thank you for the question. Elaine is a revisiting guest here, and she has rheumatoid arthritis, and she says she takes very strong medication for this. Are there any natural herbs that she can take? And I know this is, kind of a tough one to target, because it's a big question.
Right. So I'm going to answer it in a broad way because, again, it's about an individual. I'm going to look at triggers that she might have. It might be dietary triggers. It might be environmental triggers that cause a flare-up. And this is how I teach my herb apprenticeship, especially in the second year. I don't teach people I don't give them the formulas unless they're in my office, then I do it. But when I'm talking about herbs, I'd rather say, let's look at a range of herbs or the actions of herbs instead of, here, try this one herb. That one herb may or may not be a good fit, even though it might be good for rheumatoid arthritis. So what I'm looking for in general are anti-inflammatory agents and things that are going to calm the immune system so that it's not attacking itself. And so instead of giving those specifics, because everybody with RA could be trying that one herb, and it might only work on one person. In the office, I'm teaching, or I'm showing people, all right, change the diet. That's going to be really important. Change exercise if you can. Those alone can bring bigger results, and then it makes the herbs work more effective. And it's going to be a range of herbs. So questions like that are great, but I want to make you think and look at the larger picture as opposed to, well, if I took this one herb, it's going to take care of it. It doesn't always work that way.
Right. And this might be a case where it would be really helpful if you have something chronic, ongoing, and
there's no such
debilitating to find a local practitioner of natural medicine that can really kind of find ways for you to back off of those heavy meds.
Right. Is it possible? Yes, because we can reduce that inflammation, in the joints, in the system. There's no such thing as a silver bullet. And when we look at the model of Western medicine, we're looking for one thing to take to get rid of whatever condition we're talking about. And with herbalism, with naturopathic medicine, it's not that case. We don't, I love when something simple works and yeah, it did the trick. It might be a silver bullet for one person, but on a broad spectrum, there's so many layers, and everybody's an individual that I'm going to treat everybody individually differently. Because what I might try for one might not work well enough for another.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that even though conventional medicine does have what they would consider to be silver bullets, and you have this disease, we'll give you this medication. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean you're being healed. It means
Correct.
that your symptom is going to be relieved or resolved, hopefully. But as we know, many of those medications can cause other problems.
Right, and sometimes those medications are actually allowing somebody to survive or allowing them to function during the day. That's really important. And so it can give us a speedy, sometimes a speedy, a recovery of, all right, I can function again. But a naturopath, if you add that to your team of doctors, is going to take a little bit deeper look and say, how do we fix everything else? A diet change might take 3 months for it to really take a deep-seated effect. Sometimes it's immediate, but oftentimes it's going to take several months for that elimination diet or that, whatever food you're avoiding to really take full effect. If I had a flare-up, I don't want to wait 3 months for a treatment. So I'm not anti-medication. And as a naturopath, I know that we seemingly anti-drug. Well, no, we are not. I'm not anti-drug. There are applications for them when appropriate. Do I want to see somebody on a drug for the rest of their life? Well, hopefully not. Hopefully we can find a reason that they are better without it.
Yeah.
Sometimes that, it's up to the individual in their case.
Right. And I think one other good distinction to make is to avoid the false sense of security, though, because a lot of people will get a medication that makes them feel better, but then you can have a false sense of security that your problem is gone.
Because the symptom was eliminated. And that's where having a team of doctors where, all right, let's look at what it did now. Let's look how it's going to affect you in 5-10 years.
Right.
And let's look at, so let's get back to digestion for a second. If you're taking an acid blocker, a proton pump inhibitor, even something to suppress the acid like a calcium supplement, trying not to say too many trade names. It can be useful if, in the treatment for an ulcer that you have right now. But if you look at the package, many of them will say, do not take for more than 14 days. And then you need to take 4 months off before you try that again, because they're healing one thing and it's not designed for long-term use. Yet that's how we're using them. So patients will come in on heartburn medications. They've been using them for 3 years or more. And well, now what we're dealing with is an imbalance of nutritional balance, nutritional status. So some of the major complaints are muscle fatigue, muscle aches, and hormone imbalance. So we look at what vitamins and minerals are they deficient in because of the acid blockers: B12, iron, magnesium, zinc, calcium, things that our body needs to survive, to thrive. And to treat a symptom, you're taking away the vitality of life long term. It worked on the short term, but you ask those who are on it chronically, they still get heartburn. The answer is why? Where'd that come from? how do we get you off a medication that is not designed to be used chronically because we have deficiencies based on that. In my office, I love going back to general anatomy, physiology, the simple sciences to say, what is the organ and how is it designed to work? Well, we have a stomach. It's designed to produce hydrochloric acid. If we suppress that, when we do, it's one thing if you have an ulcer and are treating something actively, but for general occasional heartburn, I don't want to suppress the function of that stomach. In fact, we have heartburn often not because of an over-acidic state in the stomach. It's designed to be acidic. It's because it's not acidic enough. So when the stomach is designed to break down our food a little bit more with fluid, it creates this this mushy mess, and the acid is breaking down those proteins, denaturing them, and then when it hits a certain state, it chemically knows to let that through to the small intestine. Well, if that stomach acid isn't doing its job, our food sits there longer. If the food's sitting there longer, it's putting more pressure on the esophageal sphincter, keeping that food in the stomach, which means it's more your patients are more likely to have acid reflux. So if this is happening, the response is not take an acid blocker, but to possibly aid the stomach in doing its job. So we look at, and another home remedy would be, instead of acid blockers, I'm looking at raw apple cider vinegar. A very simple thing, and it takes it doesn't take much. A teaspoon, some dilute it in water. Do that before meals, and it gives your stomach a little extra help when it needs it. One of the concerns is if you're on an acid blocker and you're not digesting and you're not able to absorb your zinc, you're then not able to make your acid again. So it creates this cyclical nature where you're now dependent on a drug to try to reduce the symptom.
Yeah.
So it self-perpetuates it, and it's very cyclical. So if I can wean them off of that ever so slowly, because if they just stop taking their medication, they're going to have a flare because the body's like, oh, the brakes are not on. Let's produce what we want. It's going to probably overcompensate and likely either cause an ulcer or exacerbate the symptoms. So if there is irritation, I heal the irritation. I reduce the inflammation before any of that happens. And then we prove to the body it didn't need it. They're doing fine without it.
Yeah. And I'm really glad that you mentioned apple cider vinegar because I think people hear that and they're like, oh my gosh, you can't drink vinegar. But yeah, if you add it to a little bit of just take a teaspoon.
I dilute it down. Yep. If it's raw, it can be a little harsh on the enamel of the teeth, sure. But if you dilute that down, get it into the stomach, yeah. I haven't seen a big problem with the dilution of that. And that's in a little bit of diluted water, it works just fine.
And it's doing so many different things. I started that as an almost daily practice. I wouldn't say I do it every single day, but when I did start doing that, I actually noticed my energy levels went up.
Right. So let's talk about that for a second.
Okay.
If you have stomach acid in your stomach, you are not only breaking down your food for better nutrition and better energy usage of those vitamins and minerals, you're killing the organisms that aren't supposed to be there. So it's a natural defense for our immune system. We have acid to kill the bacteria and the germs that you eat an apple, there are organisms on it. It's not sterile. Our body can handle it just fine. But if your stomach acid is too alkaline on that side, if you lower the acid where it's becoming too basic, you're going to set yourself up for dysbiosis, which is a fancy term for bacteria that is in the wrong percentage, wrong proportion, wrong selection. So that itself can cause somebody to have Sorry, I'm reading some of these things that are popping up on my screen. Some questions, and we will get to them. So if you have dysbiosis, you have fatigue issues because you're now not able to digest and absorb the nutrients that's supposed to happen in the lower gut. So we have multiple phases of assimilation, and if there's dysbiosis, you're not often absorbing what you think you're absorbing. So energy will decline. So to go back, apple cider vinegar is a really good benefit, has a good benefit for all of that whole pathway. We look at herbs that are bitter as well. Bitter things like dandelion root, burdock root, yellow dock root are also going to stimulate that hydrochloric acid production. And so we use this to prevent ulcers. You don't want to use it if you have an ulcer because, well, it's going to aggravate things. So come see me first, and then I'll treat the ulcer, and then we'll incorporate the bitters over time when the body is able to do it. But we're looking at bitters. And those 3 herbs, backyard herbs, something that everybody has free. So we look at the cost of healthcare, and I don't want to get into that. It's a soapbox, or that's a whole conversation unto itself.
Right.
Why try things that are working that are free? Let's dig things up from our backyard or your neighbor's backyard, or drive down the road. You're going to see these herbs. And the knowledge of that, I think, is very powerful. And that's why, on top of being in the clinic, helping people on the individual basis, I'm teaching about herbalism because I can teach people how to do everything that I'm talking about, and they can try that on their own. Then when that doesn't seem to work, so somebody is still having, they think they have an ulcer where they have been treating for heartburn for a little while. It's still there, perhaps. It's really persistent. That come on in, and we'll change things up. We'll find out where that's coming from. So self-care is really important, and then you need to know when's enough. When do you want to go see your doctor? And in Central Maine, I have a lot of patients who don't like seeing doctors and refuse to see a doctor. Well, I make sure that I don't look like that doctor. I don't want them to fear coming to see me. We have conversations. I don't dictate. I don't teach, I don't speak over them. I want to have that conversation because what they're saying is as important as what I'm going to say in response, which would be, here's the condition, I have questions, and I uncover a lot of things. So the example there is, I love working with people with hypertension because I try to get them to stop having white coat syndrome. When they come into their doctor and they get their blood pressure taken, it's generally high. People don't like seeing their doctor. That's just, so they avoid it. When they come see me, they'll tell me, you're going to take this blood pressure. I know it's going to be high, but it's low everywhere else. All right, I'll take that into consideration. I say, I still have to take the blood pressure, but after several times, they've relaxed. They know that I'm not judging them for that symptom of hypertension, that I'm going to look deeper and we're going to address it. Getting patients to feel relaxed in an office setting, very important. And I'm not sure where I was going down that spiral, but maybe you can get me.
I think it's a good distinction to make, and it's understandable that most people have elevated blood pressure in a doctor's office or a hospital. Like most of those settings are more like laboratories, and that this is where a naturopath
very unnatural, yes.
Right, a naturopath's office is very different. It is more relaxed, and it's just a distinction to make. Like we said, the labs have their place, but
right.
I personally keep it limited to emergency care for my overall health. If I can go to somebody who's going to teach me self-care techniques and little things I can change on a daily basis to help boost my overall health, that's really the way to go. And my opinion, but I think it's the answer to our healthcare crisis.
Right. So those who I put on a hypertension formula, because while they might have hypertension, they question, am I going to be on this for the rest of my life? And the goal is no. And one of the best, the success stories are when patients, their blood pressure is maintaining normal. We're reducing the herbal formulas to say, I don't think you need this anymore. And it's very freeing for the doctor to say, you don't need this remedy anymore. If we run into the again, we'll readdress it. But right now, we might not need it. And, that's an awesome thing when you can take somebody even off of their herbal formulas and then go back to just general formulas, based nutrition, and even I consider myself relatively healthy. I'm doing herbal remedies every day, so that's going to be what I am, how I'm maintaining health and vitality. But I'm not actively treating a condition, say with some of these teas. It's nice when you have the freedom to say, what tea do I want, instead of I got to take my tea again. Big difference. And it's quite amazing when you see the system healing where it doesn't need adjustment any longer. It's right. Self-regulating. You're maintaining and improving the function of that organ system. And we can talk about any organ system. The goal is to let it maintain its health. The body has an innate ability to heal. That's one of the naturopathic tenets. And when we allow the body to heal or encourage it, so a lot of my remedies are very gentle, very subtle, because I'm nudging. I'm not forcing the body to do one thing or another. We have drugs for that, and that's good for some situations, but not for all. And so those coming to see me, fortunately, I'm able to work with that on the very subtle level, but profound, because it's doing the job.
Yeah, and just to highlight something that you said, it's a paradigm shift, but the body has the ability to heal itself if you get what it needs. And one thing I heard on a podcast perhaps the other day, just the more you eat these herbs in your daily basis, or on a daily basis, the less you're going to need them for medicine. You use it more.
And an herbalist is going to recognize that your food and your medicine should be one and the same. Hippocrates taught us that. So my medicine is my daily intake of food and teas, because I consider, I'm going to drink tea. I need fluids. I enjoy tea. It's going to be something that's very nutritious at the same time as, well, I'm getting some calcium in my tea today because I wanted to make sure that my throat was able to talk for an hour. It's doing fine. But at the same time, I'm getting some calcium. I'm getting general food doses of the medicine. And that's going to set me up for, to me, that's more grounding, more sustainable than waiting and then trying to recorrect later. This is prevent best.
Exactly. Wow. We've covered a lot of stuff. Just to do a little support here. Elaine was asking where you're located. We covered that. You're right here in Waterville.
On Post Office Square, yep, right down in the old post office building.
Exactly. And we're going to make sure you know where to find him at his website and everything.
drpetley.com.
Okay, Dr. Nate Petley?
drpetley.com, DRPETLEY. And I'll put it in the comments, and maybe if afterwards somehow
we'll put it in the notes and in the comments. And Elaine was Elaine's in Boston, actually.
All right.
Thanks again for joining us from Boston, Elaine.
All right, thank you.
He is looking for somebody in the Boston area, so there must be a network or...
There is. So most of our states have a state association for naturopathic doctors, and it's called something different. I forget what the Massachusetts group is called, but look up, Maine is called Maine Association of Naturopathic Doctors. Massachusetts is called something similar acronym, but get on that. And you're going to see who's a member of the state association, and you're going to see who's in the Boston area. And that's true for every other state. I get asked that, do I know somebody? Not necessarily, unless I went to school with them. But can I find somebody who might be a good fit by looking at their state associations? And then you can read through and say, all right, I like what this person is focusing on. I like, the location, whatever style, because medicine, it's about the doctor-patient relationship. We need to have a good relationship. And if it's not a fit, don't bother. Find somebody new, because the benefits aren't going to be there as well as if you want to see somebody that you actually have a good fit with. So fortunately, in the greater, in the Waterville area, we have a lot of amazing doctors here. In fact, Maine has some amazing doctors, and it's ever growing in number. So if you're in Maine, go to mand.org. That's our acronym, and you're going to see a doctor in your area. I just saw Lynn. Hi, Lynn. Another doctor in southern Maine. So we are spread out, and I'm happy to answer questions, helping to direct that. Because if I don't address the condition, there's going to be another doctor who does. And they might not use herbs as a naturopath. I do, because that's my passion. That's my, I've been studying herbs since, in high school, I was focusing on herbs in general, plants in general. And so I studied horticulture, my master's degree was in plant propagation. I loved working with plants. And then I was introduced to, these plants that you're working with in the field actually have a medicinal value. So that's what I bring to the table in my office. Other doctors are going to work on things like homeopathy. Some focus mostly on nutrition and then add supplements as a secondary. We all have different things. And that's why find somebody who's fitting what you need. Ask those questions. And in Boston, find somebody who's doing, specifically rheumatology in this case, or who might be treating in a way that you want to see, if that's a fit.
Absolutely. Those are all great tips. Again, it's excellent when you have the options of maybe interviewing a couple different practitioners or talking to them and trying to find
at least our local doctors, call them. I do a free 15-minute consult. I'm not giving medical advice, but it's 15 minutes to say, are we a good fit? You get to ask the preliminary questions. Who are you? What are you doing? How do you do it differently than somebody X, Y, or Z that I've already seen? All right, let's get into, again, not medical answers, but is this going to be a fit? I do the same thing. I love those 15-minute consults, because I get to say, I understand you broke your arm and you want to see a naturopathic doctor. You first probably need to go see, go to the emergency room first, get that set, then come see me. As one of our local doctors, and I love quoting him for this, if you get hit by a bus, go see the emergency room. If you feel like you've got hit by a bus, come see a naturopath.
That's a great distinction.
Difference. So in the 15-minute consults that people are, we feel each other out in terms of, are we a good fit? Yes, that's really important. And I find that it strengthens that doctor-patient relationship. And that was a class from med school. Day one, doctor-patient relationship is the most important part of medicine. I hope my instructor is watching, because that was, that's really key to my successful practice. Doctor-patient relationship is key.
Excellent. Well, we're getting a lot of great feedback from everybody. Everybody's really enjoying the conversation. So I really appreciate everybody making time this morning to join us. We've covered a lot of stuff.
There's a lot.
In fact, this has gone a little longer than we had anticipated, but hey, that's good. I'm glad that we were able to kind of highlight what you're doing on a daily basis, show people the differences between a naturopathic doctor and a conventional medical doctor if they're not familiar, different ways they can use herbs on a daily basis for self-care and prevention. And
we can do extra hours on any one of those topics. So this is really a broad view.
Yeah, perhaps we will going forward. If you're willing to come back and we have the interest, we'll do some more.
This is a lot of fun. This is my first live Facebook feed, so I had no idea. I'm not very, live is an interesting aspect of doing. I'd rather teach in a room full of 100 people. Live is a little different, but this was much easier than my nerves are calm now.
And your reach is
Oh, here's another usage of my tea blend. Cold and flu, throat, that chamomile in there might have just calmed those nerves ever so slightly, so I'm not on the edge of my seat this whole time. Very relaxed, much different, yes.
All right. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, we're going to put some show notes together for you guys, and I'll link to that in the comments section. Just visit back, maybe this time tomorrow or whatever, just so we can get that together for you. Dr. Petley said he's willing to do 15 minutes over the phone to see if it's a right fit for you. If you're looking for somebody locally, give him a call or visit his website. Dr. Petley, what else do you have on the website that people can look for as far as offerings go?
Great question and a great plug. I do teach a 3-year herb apprenticeship. Last year was the first year. So it's 3 years, but you can sign up for year 1 and just stay there if that's what you're looking for. I teach that here in Waterville, and it's a way to, in year 1, learn all of the herbal products. So when I say make a tea, what does that mean? If I talked about tinctures or oil extracts, or I said, use a sap, how do you make those products? That's year 1. 10 months, the second Saturday of every month is year 1. Year 2 is exactly what we're covering in this episode, is what's the anatomy and physiology that an herbalist is able to look at, and what goes wrong, so that's pathology, and what are some of those treatment ideas. So in that sense, I'll be teaching not the specifics, although I'll give them ideas, but how do we approach this from a holistic point of view? How do I look at an herb instead of chamomile for sleep? It's chamomile as an anti-inflammatory that might help these other 5 conditions. Or in this way, I'm able to teach instead of one herb for one condition, or I'm going to be teaching one herb to treat hundreds of conditions.
Which makes so much more sense. It just sounds a lot more efficient.
So it's not a one-to-one direct. It's like if we look at the function of the herb, or the function of the herb, we open up to what's it really doing. Is it antimicrobial? Is it an anti-inflammatory? All right, how do we use that combination to its maximum? So I love using, learning one herb and finding 100 different ways how to use that one herb. And chamomile is a great one to start. If somebody's looking to start learning herbs, start with chamomile. There are hundreds of ways to use that one herb.
Really?
Think of lavender, also really useful. So that's year 2 of the herb apprenticeship, and that's all on the website. Year 3 is getting that live person interview for a client. How do you put it all together and say, we can't use the word treatment in herbalism, but how do we work with somebody's health using herbs? And that we can do, and we can do that on the herbal level. So that's available on the website. We are starting the new season in February, year 1 and year 2, brand new years. So there are some seats left in year 1 for those who are interested. Otherwise, on the website you'll find information about the clinic, information about my background, a little longer story about where I've come, how I grew up in Central Maine, left, and have now come back to practice. Also, there's a few articles that I started a blog that I'm not very consistent in writing. So some blog articles on how to use acorns, that sort of thing. Links to Facebook. So if you're on Facebook, please like my page. And that just helps me get word out of the events happening. So there's also a lecture, a calendar. So I do local classes, and I teach abroad. So you can find out where I'm going to be, when, and how to jump on that.
Excellent. Yeah, I know your workshops and courses have been a big draw, and our natural health community here in Central Maine. So yeah, you got to work. And thank you for that. Now, just want to make sure that we covered everything. Are there any other questions that perhaps I didn't think to ask, or just something you wanted to mention regarding?
We have covered so much. No, I think in one to do it all in one. I think we did it.
All right.
We
Well,
can always revisit digestive health and get a little more specific, and do an herbal formula, because we did a lot of the philosophies of healing, which I find to be the most important conversation to have. It's sometimes more important to do the philosophy of healing than it is to do the specifics in the treatment plan, because you get lost in, well, there are 20 different herbs that I could use and choose from, probably hundreds of thousands. Which one is it? I'm going to choose based on the philosophies of healing. And so that's why I go into great detail in a lot of these classes, because I want people to shift that paradigm, as you said, from if this condition, or if this condition, or vice versa. Let's think about it on that larger scale, because we get deeper healing when we do that. And I've really opened up a lot of different cases where they tried all of those herbs. Why didn't they work? Well, because we needed to tweak something based on the philosophies of healing. And when I'm stuck with a case and say, all right, I really don't know what do I do next? I go back, I read those tenets. And every single time I go back to read them, I say, you know what, I missed this one, or I didn't really, I need to strengthen this one over here. And when I do that, it opens up the case, and it makes a huge difference for the patients. So a lecture like this, yes, we did a lot of the philosophy. We can get into specifics. In fact, I'm going to be teaching an Herb of the Month series this year, something new. This year, in January, it's going to be echinacea. So we're going to look at all of the different uses. So it's 2.5 hours on one herb. I've taught classes in the past where we're doing 5 herbs in a night, but we skim. And I felt like we were missing a whole lot of the story behind each of these plants.
Okay. So was that one of your workshops, or part of your?
That's going to be a separate workshop, a separate class on the 24th, I believe, of this month. I'll have to look at my own schedule.
Okay. All right, good to know. We do have one more question before we completely wrap up. Jenna, thanks for joining us. I get constant stabbing pain in my T1 area after I eat, in and around the actual spine. Now, is this where you might want to?
This is a question that is going to require me to ask 50 more questions.
Okay.
And that's why sometimes treating, questions are great. What I would say is, yes, go see a naturopath, because there's a lot of things. Stabbing pain doesn't sound good. So see somebody to investigate, because yes, that needs to be looked at, probably instead of doing home health care at the moment. Go find somebody to investigate, because that sounds a little more alarming than I have a little bit of dull ache when I eat something that I shouldn't be eating. All right, that's something you can probably treat at home. Here it sounds a little bit more intense than what we could get into.
Exactly.
Would be, I'm going to teach, what are the questions that need to be asked?
Right.
In cases like this, what are the 5 most important things? What are the 10 most important things?
Okay.
Fortunately, I can't do that at the moment, because my brain is whirling with, oh, what about X, Y, and Z, and if, and that's why a conversation or a visit with a naturopathic doctor often will be up to 1.5 hours in length, sometimes longer if the doctor is able to take the time. We need to get those stories to understand the condition.
That's the other great distinction with a naturopath. Members of your community who are trained, that can actually spend some time with you, versus the healthcare model, kind of people in and out based on insurance preferences and stuff like that. Now, just one last thing to wrap up, Dr. Nate, because I do like to look at things in a big picture. What is your vision of an efficient and effective healthcare system going forward in the future?
In a large sense, one that integrates and respects all facets of the medical establishment. Naturopaths are licensed doctors in the state of Maine. And it would be nice to be integrated a little bit more for our specialties that we are able to offer our patients. And we could do a whole lecture on that. But in a nutshell, naturopathic doctors are saving money. Unfortunately, right now, some of that money is out-of-pocket expenses because we have to deal with insurance companies who aren't covering as well as they could be or should be. If we're integrated better, perhaps patients have the option to see a naturopath, where at the moment, for many, it can be out of pocket. But having the option and getting it widespread to say, I have this condition. Where do I want to go seek help? Do I want X, Y, or Z type of doctor? And there are different types. Who do I want to go to first? And having the freedom to do that, so that they feel most comfortable. And then having the communication between all those types of doctors to say, oh, good idea, I can work with this, or you need to go see them first and then come over here. So seeing a naturopath, we become often the primary care, only because we are helping organize who else they're seeing. Currently, patients see so many different types of doctors. Nobody's bringing that information back to one doctor to say, how do we put this together? They zoom into the digestive health. They zoom into musculoskeletal. You go see these specialists and nobody's talking to the other specialists. The primary care should be doing that. Well, the primary care today, they're too busy to take that time. In my office, I try to put that together and help understand, all right, this means this in this system, and then how do we overlap that? And what are these common threads? And how, basically, how do we put this together? So having conversations. So ideally, better communication is where I see a better system, because I think there's a lack of, not that individuals aren't trying, but on a whole, we can do better.
Absolutely. I think that's pretty clear that we can do better. And, also the fact that you mentioned the freedom of choice to see the type of practitioner you'd like that practices the type of medicine that you would.
Because every specialist they're a specialist. We, naturopathic doctors are specialists in natural medicine. If you're really shy of taking a drug and you refuse to see a doctor because that's what they're offering, you need the option to see somebody who's not prescribing that drug. And then if they, and then feel comfortable if they say, at this moment you need that drug for a short time, you might feel more comfortable to treat correctly. So going to somebody you feel comfortable with, yes, that's really important.
And this is probably where I ought to drop the disclaimer, because I should have done it in the beginning, but none of this is meant to be taken as healthcare advice or whatever. And if you do change anything in your personal regimen, please consult your own healthcare professional. And just know that you do have options when it comes to healthcare professionals. They are out there. So, all right. Well, Dr. Nay, I think we should probably wrap it up here. It's been a solid hour. I think it's been awesome, and I hope that we can do it again sometime soon.
Absolutely. I can't wait. This is a lot of fun.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming, and please join us again. We are doing these on a weekly basis, and we'll look forward to seeing you there. Bring your questions.
Great. Thank you.
And don't forget to check out his website, Dr. Petley's website at drpetley.com. And come back and see us for some show notes. Okay.
All right.
All right. Bye for now.